Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Now the PS5 will probably be my last PlayStation console, I'm not even joking. The removal of the disc drive from the PS5 Pro, the scalping situation with the detachable drives, and the online check during the initial setup has pretty much just alienated me entirely, but that's a topic for another day. So today, I want to talk about something called platform loyalty. You see, the PS5 Pro is a funny phenomenon because I feel like it gave opportunity for a lot of people to attack the concept of console gaming now that we have a console that's edging on the price of typical gaming builds. So as a result, I've been seeing a lot of pretty wild takes that I want to call out for being a bit off. Now, before I get to that, I do want to make something abundantly clear. I do not recommend buying the PS5 Pro. If you want a PS5, just get the base version. Don't waste your money on a PS5 Pro. In my opinion, if you're getting to the point where you're spending 800 euros for a gaming device, it just makes more sense to just save a couple of $100 and build a gaming rig. Consoles don't offer that much value beyond being a gaming and media consumption device. At $500, I can somewhat accept it, but once we're getting to the range of 800, we're getting closer and closer to the 1000, which at that point, I feel like you should just build a gaming PC. You can do a lot more with a PC like emulation, content creation, real-time upscaling using Anime 4K as I've shown before in the past. So yes, I do think you shouldn't buy the PS5 Pro, but this is where my perspective differs from a lot of people. You see, my reason for not recommending a PS5 Pro mostly comes from me believing that at that price range, it's just harder to justify spending money on something that's only meant for gaming. It has nothing to do with me thinking that the price goes above the value of the hardware, because if we're using that criteria, the PS5 Pro, technically speaking, is not badly priced. In fact, compared to a PC of equivalent specs, the PS5 Pro is around $200 to $500 less expensive, and that's only if we're using the RX 7700 XT as a reference, which is weaker than the actual GPU on a PS5 Pro, and yet it's the safest choice for an equivalent GPU since RDNA 4 isn't out yet. And this shouldn't really come as a surprise to anyone. Consoles are sold at a loss, they're almost always going to be cheaper than an equivalent PC build, and bear in mind that an equivalent PC build doesn't always necessarily mean that it's going to get the same performance, because consoles handle memory allocation and data cache more efficiently than PC since they're running under an APU with unified memory. So there are some games that may be CPU bottleneck on PC, and you might not necessarily experience the same bottlenecks, or at the very least not as bad if you run it on a console. Now again, let me make this clear. I'm not saying you should buy a PS5 Pro. To repeat myself, don't buy it. This is not an endorsement of this console. I'm just simply sharing facts, because at the end of the day, reality is reality. And one of the main reasons for why I'm making this video is because I got involved in some amusing disputes on Twitter, because someone posted that with Alan Wake 2, the 4070 runs better than the PS5 Pro. Now, I do want to mention one thing very briefly. I actually have some additional thoughts on Alan Wake 2 being used as a benchmark for comparing the PS5 Pro with the 4070, but I think it's best to save that for a different time because there's some nuance to that game. But I do want to highlight the tweet where I said, "It's funny how people are trying to argue that a graphics card that costs almost as much as the entire PS5 Pro has better performance. Like, really, do tell." Following this, I got some pretty interesting responses. Now bear in mind that with some of these, I've already hashed out with the users in question, so no animosity towards any of these people. At the end of the day, it's just Twitter banter, don't take it super seriously. But one of the things that actually surprised me was apparently there's this claim made by PlayStation fanboys that the PS5 Pro was as powerful as the 4070. Now, it might just be because I don't hang around these crowds, but I've never heard of this claim. This is legitimately the first time I've ever heard anyone make this claim, and I don't know why people would say that. Like, honestly, I think the idea of comparing a PS5 with an Nvidia GPU makes no sense since PlayStation consoles are based on AMD graphics, and there are a lot of architectural differences that can affect performance. Like, some games run better on AMD cards. Like, I think Call of Duty is one of those games where with each annual title, it just performs weirdly well on AMD cards. Even the RX 6900 XT would sometimes beat the 3090, even though the 3090 was objectively more powerful. But there are also some games where Nvidia cards are more favored. I think Counter-Strike 2 was one of them. That's why I personally don't like comparing consoles with Nvidia cards, because even if you find a card that more or less consistently matches an Nvidia card, you're still going to find some games where it might favor one GPU over the other. So I don't really get why people do that, but whatever, I guess people do it anyway. I mean, it makes no sense, but whatever. Do whatever you want. Now, one argument I often heard was the idea that even if the upfront payment is cheaper with consoles, over time you'll end up saving money on PC because of game sales and the lack of subscription requirements for online services. Now, I find this argument to be very flawed for two reasons. For one, PlayStation also has game sales on their store. Like, trust me, when I first bought my PS5, I did not have money lying around to buy any games that I wanted. I would always take advantage of game sales. PlayStation would often have these lists of sales available on their store with below 20 euros or below 50 or below 10 euros. This happens quite a lot till this day. Steam isn't the only platform that has game sales. Now, I'm sure on average, maybe Valve offers deals more frequently than PlayStation, maybe the prices might be a bit lower, but then again, you can also sometimes find better deals in third-party retailers. So that's one issue that I have with this argument. The other problem I have is that I feel like this idea of PlayStation having higher expenses over time is entirely dependent on each individual's buying habits. For example, right now I'm living in Portugal, but if I was living in my home country, Mozambique, I wouldn't even pay for PlayStation Plus because that country isn't even supported. And while I'm sure I could probably find PS Plus gift cards somewhere, given how I barely even play online, I guarantee you that I wouldn't even bother doing that. However, I do live in Portugal, and I do in fact pay for PlayStation Plus. Now, since I pay for the annual subscription, assuming that the PS5 will last 8 years before the PS6 comes out, I would be paying a total of roughly 576 euros over the course of 8 years. Now, this is actually much higher than what I actually pay because I always buy annual subscriptions when they're on sale, but just for the sake of being charitable, let's say I buy them full priced. Now, 576 euros, that's quite a lot. I actually despise the fact that PlayStation and Xbox lock away their online features behind a paywall. I will forever be against this. But here's the thing, although this is an extreme amount, I would still say there are probably people out there that spend more money than I do. There are people out there that pay for more expensive hardware, have a habit of upgrading their GPU within 4 years, some even upgrade whenever there's a new generation of GeForce, so within 2 years. Like, you seriously don't think these people are spending more money than I am? You don't think people who pay for every majorly released AAA game, some even buying the 3-figure bundles, meanwhile at most I'll pay for maybe 5 full price games per year maximum? You don't think these people are spending more money than I am? Well, here's the funniest twist. Maybe they aren't. You know why? Because I spent more than 3,000 euros on my current gaming rig, without even mentioning any of the other PCs that I've built separately for recording and for nested virtualization. I've spent way more money on my PC hobbies than I ever will on my PS5. Do I regret it? Absolutely not. Why? Because they're my expenses. They're my interests. There are people out there that might be gaming on much cheaper gaming builds and pirate every single game that they play. Those people, I know for a fact they're spending less money than I do with my PS5, but the kinds of people who are buying 4090s, like, really, you're seriously trying to convince me with a straight face that they're saving more money than the average PlayStation user? The point is, it's entirely dependent on the user. PlayStation can be expensive with its added subscription, but you also have the choice to just simply not pay for it. And even if you do pay for it, depending on your spending habits, there are still scenarios where you can save money compared to other customers. It's entirely dependent on how much money you're willing to spend. Like 5 years ago, when I didn't have a job and was still attending college, if you try to convince me with a straight face that I was spending more money than the average PC gamer with high-end GPUs just because I was paying for PlayStation Plus, I would have laughed at you and frankly would be a little bit offended by your accusation because I was barely spending any money with that console. I was really counting my coins. But then again, there are some PC gamers that do the same thing. So I feel like this is much more nuanced than people make it out to be. Yes, you can probably end up saving more money if you buy cheaper parts. Like, if you're going with the integrated graphics route, we can definitely save some cash, as well as just not paying for any game and engaging exclusively in free-to-play games or just straight up piracy. But I have a feeling that the kinds of people who have enough money to burn on modern RTX cards are probably not saving as much money as they claim you can. And if you are someone who's gaming on a cheap entry-level gaming PC like integrated graphics tier, While I completely understand why you would make the money argument that PlayStation is too expensive, what I don't understand is why you would also go ahead and cheer for all of the like high-end gaming PCs that absolutely destroy consoles. Like, brother, you have no authority on this discussion. Like, you sound like one of those Nvidia fans that like go ahead and say, oh yeah, Nvidia crushes AMD, like fuck AMD. And then when you ask what card you have, they're like, oh yeah, I have a 3050. I'm just like, dude, you do realize that AMD releases cards that are faster than that. Like, but then again, I'm not surprised. It's just people cheering for multi-billion, trillion-dollar companies. Fanboyism is expressed everywhere, on every single corner of the internet. In fact, this actually reminds me of someone else who claimed that their GPU costs significantly less and runs games better than the PS5 Pro. So I asked which GPU they have, and their replying say that it was the 3060. Now, I'm not here to throw shade at this card. In fact, I actually find it to be a pretty decent card, especially with more recent prices compared to when it was released. But I'm just gonna put it nicely. This card is not faster than the PS5 Pro. In fact, I don't even feel that comfortable saying that this is more powerful than the base PS5. If you want to cherry pick results from Nvidia sponsored games to claim that this card is more powerful than the PS5 Pro, sure, go ahead, it's a free country, but I ain't budging. Now, I saw more comments that I found to be pretty amusing that were in response to another tweet. So this person said, bro, what do you mean you'd rather spend $800 on a PS5 than a $4,000 gaming PC? Now, I assume they're being sarcastic because obviously you don't need to spend that amount of money to build a gaming PC. But one of the replies I saw was, spends $800 on a PlayStation just so you're able to play 5 games. Which, that just makes no sense. I assume they mean this generation doesn't have a lot of PS5 exclusives, but still, that's a stupid point. Like, you can play third-party games on PlayStation. Spend $800 on a PlayStation, then get all of your movies and games taken away. Lamau. That literally applies to every platform out there. That's not a PlayStation exclusive problem. That's a digital versus physical problem. Which, by the way, consoles are the only platforms where you can buy physical copies of games, and compared to Xbox and even to some degree Nintendo with third-party games, PlayStation has less incidents of games not being included in the disc. So it almost feels like you're arguing in favor of PlayStation here. Like, I think you might want to walk back on this point, buddy. Spend $800 on a console with hardware slower than hardware released 4 years ago. What hardware are you comparing this to? You know, technically speaking, a 4070 Super is slower than a 3090, which is a card that also came out 4 years ago. Does that mean the card is bad? No? So what the fuck point are you trying to make? Another very common argument that I often hear is that the console didn't receive a CPU upgrade, therefore it's pointless. Yes, because changing the main processor that the operating system and graphics API are optimized for, just for the sake of improving a few games that I can count with my fucking fingers that don't run at a consistent 60 FPS, yeah, that makes total sense. Let's potentially introduce more issues with backwards compatibility for a console that's only meant to be a midlife upgrade instead of focusing our resources into the next generation of consoles, because investing time and resource into creating another custom CPU with a different set of instructions, different power profiles, different scheduler requirements, yeah, it makes total sense to just change all of that for a PS5 Pro. You know, I feel like people who say this are very PC brained and are used to just swapping out parts on their computer and don't understand that the Windows kernel is designed to be hardware agnostic, which doesn't apply to consoles at all. Microsoft benefits from serialization of processor generations because they make money from vendors commercializing these products. That's why their operating system supports a wide spread of hardware permutations. Consoles don't. They only need a certain processor for the next 8 years. They designed their operating system with that processor in mind and encourage developers to fine-tune their games around the strengths and limitations of their CPU. Brute forcing performance by upgrading your hardware isn't always the solution to your problems. Now, since people are incapable of having honest opinions, let me share you some actual legitimate reasons for why you should consider a PC over a PS5 Pro. Number 1, you're able to customize the graphics settings with more liberty. So if you're not satisfied with the preset that the game chose, you can customize your own preset to target the resolution, frame rate, and settings to your liking. And later down the line, you can even upgrade your PC if you feel like you want to play with even higher settings. Number 2, mod support. Even as someone who doesn't care too much for modding, I can tell you right now that there are some games where you can end up discovering new ways to have fun with the games that you own, as well as preserve certain changes that were made over time. Like, for example, in my case, I like the Yakuza series, and I like downloading the restoration mods that restore a couple of songs, as well as entire character models in the case of Tanimura. Number 3, emulation. Should I say more? In fact, that alone should be enough reason to build a PC in general, if you ask me. Number 4, indie games. While PlayStation does have indie games, Steam generally has a lot more, and you can find even more games on other websites. Number 5, metrics overlay. Admittedly, this is a me thing. I'm actually incapable of playing games now without knowing how much of my hardware is being utilized. My mind has been completely corrupted, like, forever. There are even more advantages, but I think the ultimate point that I want to make is that PC gaming is actually pretty great. I want nothing more than to encourage people to get into PC gaming. Even better if I can get people to get into Linux gaming, but that's a battle for a different time. However, one thing that I don't like is platform loyalty. Here's a bit of a slice of reality that I want to convey to you. Some people just don't care about PC gaming. You see, whenever I tell people, by the way, don't buy the PS5 Pro, just buy the base PS5 instead, I say this not necessarily because I wouldn't encourage someone to buy a PC, it's just because I know for a fact that there are some people that are just not interested in PC gaming at all. That's just a fact. Some people are not interested in the hobby of building a PC. Some people don't even use Windows as their operating system. They have a MacBook, and if they want to play a game, they'll either play PUBG on their iPhone or get a gaming console. And that could happen either because they don't like the price of PC parts, they don't like the decrepit nature of PC gaming, they prefer the simplicity of video game consoles, maybe they don't care that much about video games in general and they just want a device to boot up FIFA and Call of Duty. Or maybe it's a combination of all those things. And it's those kinds of people who are likely buying PS5 Pros and contributing to the current sales that we're seeing right now. And that is just the brutal reality that you have to accept. But regardless, I am someone who's just passionate about Japanese media in general, including video games, which is why I have a gaming PC and I buy every console, except for Xbox, because Japanese developers don't give a shit about Xbox. Which is why I find it so cringe whenever I see these pointless, absolutely pointless debates about which plastic box is better for gaming. And I feel even more embarrassed when I see PC gamers desperate to prove that PC is better than consoles by claiming that their $1,000 PC beats a PS5, as if that's some fucking own on consoles. Like, buddy, you're paying for something that's several hundreds, if not 2 to 3 times more expensive. If your PC didn't surpass a PS5, that wouldn't just be a simple missed opportunity to own the consoles, that would just be a scam. You should expect your PC to run better than a console. If you buy a graphics card from a GPU manufacturer that charges insane prices for their products, the first thing that you should worry about is whether or not that thing is worth the price for its performance, not whether or not it destroys a console. That should just be a given. So it comes off as very insecure when you try to boast about it destroying the PS5, as if people who buy a device that costs $500 to $800 expect it to perform better than something that has well surpassed the $1,000 threshold. You see, this is the difference between people who just want to play video games and benchmark gamers. People who are more concerned about squeezing FPS than actually playing the game for fun, and for some reason act as if their 4-figure value gaming PC beating a cheaper console sold at a loss is some kind of trophy. That's like if an Apple user who spends $1,000 on their iPhone starts bragging about their phone being faster and having a better camera than a cheap sub $300 Android phone. Like, really, you're telling me that your overly expensive phone that costs 3 times more than a cheap Android phone is better? Like, wow, what a fucking revelation. Please elaborate more, I'm very intrigued. Like, call me old-fashioned, but isn't the most important part about the video game hobby is, you know, playing video games? Why are we focusing on which plastic box is better? I mean, speaking personally, I have a decent PC that definitely outperforms the PS5 without a doubt, but has that actually stopped me from booting up my PS5? Not at all. There are still a few PlayStation exclusives, including ones that are literally out of print, that I'm still interested in playing. I'm still a proponent of physical media, so I buy discs and I might as well play them. With that said, I still think the PS5 Pro is worthless. If you need a PlayStation console for whatever reason you may have, just buy the base version. Games are still going to be produced with that SKU in mind. I don't think you should be too worried about being outdated or anything like that. The base PS5 will still be relevant even after the PS6 launches, so I wouldn't be too concerned about that. But to finish off this video, just don't be cringe. You know, we like to make fun of console fanboys, but when you evangelize PC gaming like this, how are you any better? You're not gonna convert people into being PC gamers by acting like this. You know, like Papa Frank once said, it's easier to just not be a dipshit. Just don't do it.